jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I have never possessed the dedication to become a true master in any art form or craft. But I make up for that by constantly trying to get pretty darn good at a wide variety of different things. One art form that I've always been really attracted to is block printing. I love the way that block prints look. They have this really wonderful quality, and they can really range a lot, all the way from like beautiful, detailed, romantic bits of art antiquity, all the way to crusty DIY gutter punk. And despite there being this like really wide spectrum of block print applications, there's some beauty, something about them that they all share. And I love that. I am not a very skilled illustrator, but I'm more than capable of creating really solid designs and images with modern tools like a tablet and Photoshop. Where I've always struggled is transferring those designs from a digital medium to a physical one, since just printing them out, lacks a sort of hands-on addition to the work. And I think that this is where block printing comes in. It's the bridge. I ordered a very basic, cheap block printing starter set on Amazon and jumped headfirst into trying this creative medium that has always fascinated me. My instinct was to do the goblin design that I had recently made for shirts. I printed it out on backing paper from printable stickers on a LaserJet printer, just like I had seen described in the tutorials that I had watched preparing for this. Usually they recommended transferring the design to the linoleum slab using plain acrylic medium. I didn't have any, but I figured Mod Podge would surely work fine for this. Turned out my Mod Podge was empty, so I went with watered down carpenter's glue. Don't ever let a lack of materials or tools stop you from trying new things. There's always an alternative. After letting it dry overnight with flat weight on it, I quickly learned that my transfer was not successful and that this design was way too complicated for me to attempt as a first try, especially with carving tools that I knew would be of a very low quality since they came in a cheap kit. I thought it would be better to switch gears a bit here. I just drew a chunky design with a Sharpie that I could use to learn the basics of carving and stamping with. I think this is the right way to go about it, bang out a simple design that should be able to be easily carved, to learn how the tools feel and operate, and get an idea of where the limitations of their detailing ability are. This went pretty well. I knew I had found myself trying something that I would end up liking a lot if I could just get the hang of it. The black speedball block printing ink I ordered showed up, and I set off trying to stamp for the first time. One thing I had seen repeatedly shown on other videos was using a sheet of glass to spread out the ink and get it transferred to a brayer. Of course, I was too excited and impatient to go find a piece of glass to use and just did it on a piece of parchment paper. This was a mistake. I don't recommend doing this. It moves around too much. There's a reason that's what people who know what they are doing use. Anyway, I loaded my brayer, rolled it out onto the stamp, and put it on some paper, hoping for the best. I don't have a press, so I just used another clean brayer to try and evenly push down the stamp. And the first pull was all right, a bit messy and heavy on the ink, but I kept going and started to get a feel for when the ink was correctly loaded and how much pressure was needed to transfer to the paper and keep things from bleeding. After doing these first tests, I took the opportunity to refine my carving a bit, which was a lot easier now that I could really see clearly on the linoleum and could reference how it actually applied. I cleaned up the design quite a bit and made some finer lines and more detail. And this time around, I was a lot more happy with the impressions that it was making and can say that I was fully and completely hooked and ready to go all in on block printing. So I moved on to a design that I made on the computer. This one was still pretty simple and hopefully easy enough to carve. This time I didn't water down the carpenter's glue. And even after drying for a full night, it was still wet in areas when I tried to remove the transfer. It eventually mostly dried and mostly transferred, but was missing some spots where it just wouldn't dry. And at this point, I figured the best thing to do, again, would just be to grab a Sharpie and fill in the missing parts freehand and move forward, which I did, and immediately noticed another problem. The carving just wasn't working as it should. The linoleum was flexing and scrunching and ripping instead of cutting. It turned out that the full-strength carpenter's glue had created a very strong and flexible skin on top of the linoleum that wouldn't allow me to carve with these cheap chisels. I really didn't want to start all over again on another transfer and wait another night for it to dry, so I said screw it and switched to carving with an X-Acto knife. Now, this is not how it's supposed to be done. There's a reason people use chisels, but I wanted to move forward. I wanted to see this design transfer to the paper, and I knew that I could have a better start on the next one. So I used the carving tools wherever they did seem to work and switched back and forth between that and an X-Acto to get the whole thing done. It wasn't a pretty process, but it did eventually get the job done. And it took me a couple of tries to get the feel for rolling on the ink and stamping to the paper, but after a few transfers, I got a print that I thought looked really cool. It wasn't as detailed and clean as I had initially envisioned with this design, but the design worked really well, looking more rough, and I called it a win. Each one came out slightly different, and that's the part that makes this art form super fun. After they dried, I was thrilled with how they looked. The ink has a strong raised texture that really sets it apart from just a printout, and that slight imperfection and change between each one gives them some soul. I liked them enough and felt proud enough of them to name them, number them, sign them, and make them available for purchase on my website. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform where you can build and host whatever creative venture you might want to share with the world. Maybe you're an artist and you want to document and display your work. Squarespace's great templates will be the easiest way for you to set up a great-looking website and gallery. Or maybe you want to sell your work. Well, Squarespace has a fantastic, super easy to use web store system where you can sell your work, easily collect payments, and ship out your orders via one of the shipping companies that seamlessly integrate with the Squarespace system. And that's what I'm doing. I've got a website for Idols of Torment where we sell our game. And now with these prints, I was able to quickly add a web store to blackmagicraft.ca so that I can list and sell you some of these original prints if you want one. So if you're in need of a website or domain, check out squarespace.com and start your free trial. And when you're ready to go public, go to squarespace.com/blackmagicraft to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. At this point, I knew I was hooked on the medium and wanted to invest in some better supplies, better quality detail blades, and some harder linoleum pieces. I also popped into Home Depot and grabbed some acetone because after doing a bit more research, I learned that you could apparently transfer LaserJet prints from normal paper to the linoleum using acetone. I made a new design and got to work. The idea is that soaking the paper with acetone will release the toner from the paper and let it transfer to the linoleum. I guess on my first try, I used too much acetone because it really blurred the image and the toner kind of bled everywhere and didn't give me anything usable. No worries, I just tried again on the other side. This time I used less acetone and took my time to burnish in the image as I went. Now, it didn't end up bleeding or blurring the image, but the transfer was very light. Not at all what I had hoped for when I had seen this technique demonstrated. I'm gonna have to continue practicing this and figure out how to do it properly because this method is instant and doesn't require waiting for anything to dry overnight, which is a huge plus for me. I had enough of the image transferred that I could go over it with a Sharpie and get a pretty clear pattern to carve out. Obviously this isn't ideal, but it was still faster than waiting for another try with glue to dry. The combination of sharper, more detailed carving blades and the denser linoleum made a huge difference. The experience doing this versus the previous one was night and day. I had so much more control over what I was doing and was able to very quickly get the confidence to do smaller and smaller details. Using better supplies not only had a better outcome, but it made the task a lot more fun. I thoroughly enjoyed doing this carving. I ended up not even turning on any music or video to help pass the time. It was really weird. I was totally engaged in this process and I found it to be a great relaxing task. I'm sure it took a long time for me to complete the whole thing, but it didn't feel like it. It was a pleasure to work on from start to finish. I did some test prints and even those came out great. I was starting to get the hang of everything. I did use the results of my test prints and my newfound confidence in carving details to go in and refine the image a lot, adding more details and highlights that I never would have been able to pull off before I got these better blades. I knew this one was gonna work really well and allow me to make a lot of prints, so I attached it to a piece of MDF to help me with the pressing process. Again, I pre-cut a ton of paper to the size I wanted and then got to work, banging out a bunch of these prints. With 50 of them successfully printed, dried, and looking great, I named and signed them as well. And I'll be putting these in my store along with the other one. This was such a blast to do. I had a bit of a shaky start, but after a bit of practice, I really started to get the hang of it. And now I feel pretty confident in my ability to work with this medium. The best part is that it's really fun and relaxing. And what more could you want from a creative process? I love the fact that I can put in all this effort into carving one of these and make a bunch of copies that are still somewhat unique and share them with you guys. So if you're interested in these, you want to get, your hands on one or both of them or whatever I make in the future, blackmagicraft.ca. I will have these in my web store there, and I'd be happy to send you some of them. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button. Let me know in the comments section. If you are an experienced block print maker, by all means, feel free to give me some advice. Let me know what I did wrong, because I would love to improve this process. And I'm definitely gonna keep doing it. If you like these videos I make and wanna help me keep making them, the best way you can do that is by supporting the channel on Patreon. I'd love to have you as the newest member of the Black Magic Craft Fellowship. That's it for this one. I'll see you again next video. Cheers.